the British Chambers of Commerce Head of Trade Policy, and we have a stellar panel of speakers and presenters this morning to cover this really important subject. Our main speaker will be Liam Smith, Director of Trade Facilitation at the BCC and the Managing Director of ChamberCustoms. Other speakers will be Michael Gazarek, Professor of Economics at the University of Sussex, the Director of the UK Trade Policy Observatory and Director at Interanalysis, and Arnie Milken, a Customs Advisor to ChamberCustoms and Managing Director at Customs Manager Limited. So we are delighted with this fantastic panel. As ever, this is a truly interactive experience. So please put your questions in the chat bar, and we will have a good time towards the end of this webinar to put those questions to the panel and have them answered. And of course, this webinar will be available on demand after the broadcast. So we will start with Liam Smith.
Sorry, we're actually going to start with Michael. Sorry, I've wrong footage there, but Michael's going to kick off and I'll come in after Arnie. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. And a big thank you to William and Leon and to the BCC to inviting me to this webinar. I'm delighted to be here. So my name is Professor Michael Gazarek. As William said, I'm Director of the UK Trade Policy Observatory. And just one or two sentences about the UK TPO. The UK TPO was established immediately after the referendum, and it's essentially a group of academics and policy people working on policy on trade based at the University of Sussex, both lawyers, economists, people in international business, and we do an awful lot of engagement with policymakers, with government officials, with media, with stakeholders, and also, of course, we're academics, so we undertake academic research. So what I want to talk to you about today, let me just share my screen with you, and that will probably make it easier. Let me get this right. Now, why is it not showing?
Challenges of technology.
The challenges of technology. Sorry, let me just try this again.
All went so well in the rehearsal.
It did go so. Hang on a sec. I might be getting there. Okay, I am there. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Excellent. So, what I want to talk to you about is three things. First of all, a little bit of background about the changes brought about by the agreement with the EU. Most of us know this quite well already, but it's worth reminding ourselves. Secondly, and I'll spend most of my time on this, on the second and third, I want to look at the evidence as to what has actually happened to exports and imports since January. We've been doing a lot of work looking at the trade data. And as part of that, I'm going to raise the question of how much trade with the EU is actually duty-free. So, what do we know about the agreement? The TCA between the UK and the EU came into force at the last minute in January 2021. It's an agreement which has no tariffs on trade and goods in either direction, providing you can prove originating status. What does that mean? It means that you don't pay a tariff on exports to the EU or on imports from the EU, providing you can prove the good was sufficiently produced in the UK or sufficiently produced in the EU. You can't just buy in a good from America, pretend it was produced in the UK and export it to the EU and not pay a tariff, because that way the Americans could access the EU market through the UK, for example. So you need to prove originating status. So although there are no tariffs on trade in goods, we do have an increase in barriers to trade between the UK and the EU, both because there will be some tariffs to be paid, but also because there's an increase in non-tariff and regulatory barriers, and that applies in both goods and services. And some of those tariffs and regulatory barriers are to do with customs and border controls. With regard to customs and border controls, the EU introduced full controls from January 2021. The UK decided not to introduce full controls. It delayed the introduction of full controls. And that's what's going to be introduced in January of this year, January 2022, in which Liam and Arnie will speak more about. So a very quick timeline. I'm not going to say much about this at all. I'm going to leave this to Liam and Arnie. So in January 2021, the UK did not introduce full customs controls, and anybody trading, buying from the EU could delay completing their import declarations by up to 175 days. The introduction of customs control and moving away from those need to complete import declarations was meant to be introduced during January 2021, but it got repeatedly delayed. The current position is that in 2022, they'll have those full customs declarations, and then there'll be more checks introduced in July, a little bit more in September, and a little bit more in November. And as I said, I'm not going to spend more time on this now, because I'm going to leave that to Liam and Arnie. What I want to move on to is to think about what do we know has happened to trade since January. So what we've done is to examine the trade data in great detail, I have to say, to assess what do the facts tell us about the impact of the TCA on UK trade. We've looked at trade in goods, trade in services, we've looked at total trade and by sector. We've actually done a little bit by region as well, but it turns out there's not much difference by region. And then, as I said earlier, the TCA was notionally duty-free, quota-free, i.e. no tariffs to be paid. And we want to assess how this is working out in practice. So first of all, look at this chart. This gives you UK trade, UK total trade in goods and services, UK total trade in goods and in services by month. And what you have is in blue, trade in goods, in green, trade in services, and sum the two and you get the grey for total trade. What we see is this negative impact on trade during lockdown, the negative impact on exports. This chart is on exports as a result of the TCA. In particular here, you see with regard to trade in goods, but then we see a rebound of trade, of exports in goods. Very similar chart with imports. You see a decline because of the lockdown, COVID effects, and then we see this dip in imports in goods, less so in services, or less noticeable in services, followed by some recovery, but not by as much recovery. And I will come back to that. So the data suggests that trade has indeed declined with the EU. But there are other factors at play. Notably, COVID-19 is a big factor at play. So whenever we hear the media, the press say, oh, trade is down as a result of the agreement with the EU, as a result of Brexit, you always have to ask yourselves, when people say that trade has declined, relative to what? What does that mean that trade has gone down? So what we do are three different sets of comparisons. First of all, we compare UK-EU trade before 2021 and after 21, but compare it to a control group. You don't just want to look at what happened to UK exports to the EU and to think about have they gone down or not before and after, because UK trade might have gone down anyway because of COVID. And therefore you need to compare UK trade to the EU with UK trade to elsewhere, what we call a control group. So we compare UK trade to EU with UK trade to non-EU countries, which are essentially the OECD countries and the BRICS. So here in that A bullet point, we're looking at what happened to UK to EU with UK to elsewhere. But other countries may have changed how much they want to import because of COVID and so on as well. So in B, we also look at the changes in EU trade with itself, and with those countries. Because maybe the EU is just importing less because of COVID. So we need to control also whether the EU is changing how much it trades with itself and other countries. And then the third technique is a fancier, more sophisticated technique where we essentially use the data to tell us which countries behaved as closely as possible to the UK prior to Brexit, and use them as a doppelganger to compare what they've done since Brexit with what the UK has done. All of these methods give us fairly similar results. So if you like, we've done three different things, partly for robustness. What we find is that exports to the EU since January, and in comparison to the previous period, and in comparison to exports to non-EU, and in comparison to what other countries are doing, appear to have gone down by about 14% over the 6 to 7 months since January. And imports from the EU appear to have gone down by about 24%. So imports have gone down by that. That's goods exports. If you look at services exports, they appear to have gone down to the EU by about 11.5%, and imports by even more, 37%. When we unpick this, there's a few really, really interesting and important messages that emerge. And some of this is surprising. If you'd asked many economists in December 2020 what they would expect, they might not have predicted some of what I'm about to say to you. And in particular, the following. The effect on UK exports happened mostly in January. Since January, pretty consistently, exports have rebounded, have recovered. If you're looking at UK to EU versus UK to non-EU. That's not true for all sectors. So the last bullet point on this slide tells you there are some sectors, footwear, headgear, some food products, textiles and clothing, where exports to the EU are consistently down, and in some cases by quite a lot. The surprising thing is that exports have on balance recovered, but not in all sectors, but that imports are consistently down. It wasn't just a January effect, it's February, March, April, May, June, July. Every month, imports from the EU are down consistently. And this gives you the percentage change by sector that we estimate that imports from the EU are down on average between January and July 2021. And you can see some sectors here, such as chemicals, where imports are down by close to 50% in comparison to what they would have been. The average decline across all sectors is about between 25 and 30%. Some sectors much more, others, you can see the sector that has impacted the least here. The two sectors are art and wood products. But these are big declines in imports from the EU, and consistently we find this across all sectors and across all methodologies, and other researchers are reporting the same sort of thing. Next thing is back to my issue that I raised earlier about this being tariff-free and duty-free. In order to export to EU duty-free, firms need to prove that they meet what are called the rules of origin, that the good was, there was enough economic activity in the UK for this to qualify as a UK good in order to access the EU market duty-free. What we find, again, consistently since January, that between about 26 and 32% of exports to the EU that could have entered under zero tariffs did not do so. In total, we're talking of the amount of trade that could have entered duty-free didn't, is probably between about £7 to £9 billion worth. Sectors where this use of duty-free access to the EU market, what we call the preference utilization rate, is very low, include footwear, textiles and clothing, leather, and precision tools. Now, the fact that firms are not using the preferences, they could export in some sense to EU duty-free if they could prove origin, but they're not, is likely to be for one of two reasons. Either the firms simply could not meet the rules of origin. They're buying in intermediate goods from America or from elsewhere, and you just cannot meet the rules of origin. You just don't do enough in the UK for this to be deemed a UK good, and so you just don't get preferential status. Or it could be that you could meet the rules of origin, but the tariff is so low in the EU, 1 or 2% for some products, that it's just not worth you trying to access duty-free. You prefer to pay the tariff because the administrative cost, the hassle of proving originating status is just too difficult. So those are probably the two most likely reasons. If you look at those preference utilization rates, so again on the left I've got percentages. This is, if you take that first column, animals, what share of UK exports in animal and animal products that could have entered the EU duty-free does enter duty-free? It's close to 100%. Preference utilization is really, really high. Now look towards the middle of the graph at textiles and clothing and footwear. Here you've got sectors where out of the trade that could have entered the EU duty-free, less than 50%, and in some cases significantly less than 50%, is entering duty-free. These are firms that are paying tariffs on exports to the EU. So the extent to which this really has turned out to be a duty-free deal in many sectors is far from the case. Let me conclude and then hand back over to Liam. It's early days yet. We're only 8-9 months in, but there's clear evidence of a negative effect. I think that the difference in the behavior on exports is a little bit puzzling, and there'll be a lot more research being done on this in the months and years to come. The interesting thing, or one of the interesting things, is that big negative impact on imports. And now, in January 2022, we've got the introduction of full customs controls. That's going to make the situation even worse. It's almost certainly going to have a further dampening effect on imports. What this work doesn't yet address, and we've got ongoing work on this, is, for example, whether we're comparing UK exports to EU with non-EU, but maybe Brexit has had an overall dampening effect on UK trade. There's some preliminary evidence on this, but it's not clear. It's also important to think about how these Brexit effects may have a differential impact across firm types, in particular on small and medium-sized enterprises versus big enterprises. And that's likely, again, to be really important come January 2022. We're about to enter this when these new full customs controls comes in. The bigger firms are much more likely to be able to handle this. The smaller firms, much less likely. But on that note, I should stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. That was a fantastic survey of what has happened in the last 11 months. I thought particularly interesting points around trade in highly regulated products like chemicals, where of course the UK decided not to pursue an arrangement within the UK's REACH system, which of course has led to duplication in authorizations, and also around clothing and footwear, where traditionally there's been a range of inputs from a variety of countries, and really stark effect on the preference utilization rates there.
Yes,
fascinating. Great. Well, now we will bring in Arnie Milken, and over to you, Arnie.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I'll also have a few slides prepared, actually only 2, so this should be quick. But thank you, first of all, for allowing me to be part of this, and what an insightful presentation on the macro level we just had. That was very, very rewarding to watch, so thank you very much. Now, what I'm going to do, and I've been working with Chamber Customs now for the whole of the Brexit ordeal. I nearly said the Brexit situation, with lots of companies, small and medium, large and complex, on helping them to navigate these new tariffs, these new laws and new regulations that we're facing. So what I have here is a bit of a experience slide. I'm going to share it in a moment, on after the first year, what are the key issues, the really practical micro level company issues that we've seen in our consultancy work, in our customs clearance work, And I wanted to share this with you before I take a look into 2022. And this, I think, puts it into a good context with what we heard previously. So I thought about how we're going to structure this, and I thought, well, why don't we go with top 10? So in our consultation, in our efforts to provide guidance, support, advice to companies navigating the Brexit challenge, what are the 10 things that we've seen that businesses struggled with or had questions on, or was, let's put it diplomatically, slightly irritated by? In a worst case, it has resulted in, as we've seen, a complete stop of either exporting or importing, depending on where you are. So it might as well that companies said, that's just too difficult, I'm going to stop it. And that could be on the EU side as well as the UK side. So here is my list of top 10 things that I would call out have been difficult or have been issues. Step 1, a fresh look at the supply chain. In the past, you received an order, you sent the truck, and that was it. London, Paris was no different from London to Manchester, more or less. But because of the single market, you could just go. Paperwork was minimal, and now this is no longer the case. Now we need to rethink, because the emergence of a very hard customs border means that supply chains have been, yes, they have been disrupted almost completely. Where before you could just go, now you need to back to the drawing board and try to map where things need to go backwards and forwards. So go to Ireland, for example, is now no longer just a question of via Antwerp to the UK onto Dublin. Now there are other routes that may be possible, even circumventing the UK altogether. So companies that did that early on in 2019 now have an advantage. But yet this year, we were advising on how supply chains now need to be re-administered or readjusted in order to make the Brexit reality work. And if that is not a homework that you've done, then that is one of the first things you urgently need to do. Back to the drawing board, look at the flows and map in a post-Brexit world. The second thing that we need to finally understand, and that is we need to help our suppliers in the EU as well. Working outside the single market is almost comparable with working with America or working with China. So this means when we trade with the EU, we need to think about, in a simplified way, if I were to trade with China, would I be doing it that way? And that helps us to understand that we now have border clearances to deal with, and that nothing is as easy as it once was. And without the realization that the EU is now a third country to us, or we are a third country to the EU, we are going to miss a trick. And this is known to us, of course, we hear it all the time, but have we really understood it? The advisory and the consultancy I've given this year makes me doubt that we understood what leaving the European single market in the customs union really means. Third challenge I have encountered again and again is the question of who actually is the importer. And that is important because we can't just assume that our buyer or our seller will be actually carrying out the importation. And if we do not have this conversation before we send the goods on our way, we will get to a point where there's no one to clear the goods for us, or this hasn't been thought through. This is important because the importer needs to be established in the country of where, or in the jurisdiction that you're importing into. So if you're sending goods to the EU, will there be an importer? And will the importer be prepared to pay the duty? If you haven't sorted this out, it means that there will be a nasty surprise on the other side, whereby the importer now has to account for VAT, has to account for duty and all other fees. And if that importer is not a VATable business, then that VAT becomes a sticky cost, and that of 20% is going to inflate the cost of your product significantly, therefore rendering doing business with you possibly not profitable anymore. which makes your customer in the EU say, could I get this from elsewhere? So who's the importer, and import clearance is really important. Another thing we've seen across this year, very practical and a good thing to think about working on in 2022, is the impact on Incoterms. What are Incoterms? There is so much confusion as to what DDP means, as to what Ex Works means, as to who does what, when, where, and why. It is crucial that you agree with your trading partners in the EU what the roles, responsibilities, risks, and costs are prior to engaging in commerce. Because this will determine who does the import clearance, who does the export clearance, who pays what costs. If you do not do that, then there may be nasty surprises in the end, and that will sour business relationships. 5, we are used to send goods with fast parcel operators. You know who they are. They themselves have been under enormous amount of pressure because they have to send hundreds and thousands of small e-commerce packages across the world and across the EU. So we got to give them some credit, but you got to make sure that you give them the right instructions. I cannot stress this enough. It is so easy to set up a UPS, FedEx, Parcel Force, whatnot account. And then you type something in, you click, and they come to collect. Just to realize that the goods get stuck in customs because there was something that you didn't click at the right moment. Before you send off fast parcels, make sure you have the terms agreed and you click the right boxes so that this does not get stuck in customs. I have seen companies that have over 1,000 products stuck in a warehouse somewhere because the fast parcel operator can't clear them because instructions were not given correctly. 6, understand what is GVMS and GMR. If you don't know abbreviations in customs, you must become a customs geek. These abbreviations will become really, really important for 2022, and Liam can explain a little bit more later. Delayed declaration. If you relied on the 175 days, we've seen over and over again, people have told me, "Oi, there's a truck in front of my door, front of my business door. I've never made a customs clearance. What do I do now?" There is still confusion as to how you submit a supplementary declaration where you did not make a customs declaration prior or when it was imported. And submitting supplementary declaration within the 175 days requires at least 50 days prior to the expiry of that day for you to get your act together, because it's not that easy. There are simplifications and approvals that are needed in order for you to lodge a supplementary declaration in the first place. IT systems. Chief will change, CDS will change. Chief will change to CDS. This is something that businesses are more and more waking up to, accessing Chief, accessing, lodging customs declaration. All of this is a minefield. There's so many boxes to click, therefore better leave it to professionals to do it for you. Chief to CDS is a major change that's going to affect your customs agents, that's going to affect us, that's going to affect everyone. And we need to be proactive about this. Otherwise, we might run into trouble clearing our goods. I won't speak about Northern Ireland because you can read so much about this in the press, but to say that it is a challenge is probably an understatement. And I'll leave you with the final impact that I've seen and we've discussed many, many times throughout the year, and that is about costs. And this is about understanding that there is customs duty to pay, which is relatively low and can be offset, as was just explained. But there is a VAT to pay that can be delayed, that can be postponed, or this can be put through the tax return if that is allowed. But there are also many other costs, fees, disbursement fees, harbor charges, and more importantly, time, effort, and clearance cost. How much time has your staff spent dealing with the Brexit impact? How much did you pay in customs clearance fees? All of this impacts your bottom line. And if you think that you might need licenses, and if you think that more licenses will be introduced in 2022, how is that going to impact the profit margin of your business. All of that to say is that the reality of Brexit is it's more complex, it's more expensive, and you need to have a certain level of customs geekiness in order to make it happen. Of course, the advantage is if you do all this, you are really ready for the world, because if you can clear into the EU, then you can clear into anywhere. Now, Liam, I was going to talk about the 2022 changes, but I think you might have a slide on that. And therefore, as I am already horribly over time, I would pass it back to you for now and pause on that, unless you want me to proceed. But back to William first.
You're absolutely on time, I think. But I'm happy to pick up there.
All right, well, we'll leave it there for now. And if there's anything else, we can pick it up in the discussion. Is that all right?
Okay, good. So I'll go straight in then, if I can then, and share my screen now on my 10 minutes, and then we're going to get into the Q&A. And thanks to everyone who's asking questions on there. Some of the interesting ones that we'll try and come to, I'm sure. So Chamber Customs and the impact. I'm going to kick off actually by taking straight into a brief video about what Chamber Customs does. It'll do it much more effectively than I can, and it'll do it in 100 seconds rather than my 10 minutes. So let's just look at a little bit of video, and then I'll come on and talk about that detailed stuff that Arnie mentioned in terms of what businesses ought to be doing to prepare for 1st of January.
How goods are cleared at the UK borders has changed and now involves more paperwork and know-how than ever before. Since January 2021, goods arriving from the EU now need an import declaration, and goods going to the EU need an export declaration. Chamber Customs are here to support and prepare you for these changes. To make life easy for trading businesses like yours, Chamber Customs offers 2 customs brokerage solutions: self-service or a fully assisted customs clearance. If you choose self-service customs clearance, we can help you with port clearance of your customs declarations and transit documents. We'll give you direct access to our system through our Exabler portal. All you need to do is upload a spreadsheet of commodity codes and associated data for fast entry and clearance. We will operate as your specialist agent when dealing with customs. You stay in control with access to our Exabler portal. Alternatively, assisted customs clearance means we'll do it all for you. Once you've provided us with your commercial invoice, packing list, and any other supporting documents, we will file your customs declarations directly into HMRC and confirm back once your goods have been cleared at the port. Chamber Customs provides efficient and compliant services with a friendly team who works smart and fast with your best interests in mind. Avoid the risk of penalties. Stay efficient and compliant with Chamber Customs, the only customs broker with direct links to all air, sea, and land port terminals in the UK. With that,
my apologies. I don't know what.
How goods are cleared. Stay efficient and compliant with Chamber Customs, the only customs broker with direct links to all air, sea, and land port terminals in the UK, with thousands of happy customers served by our offices across the UK. Contact Chamber Customs today to speak to one of our friendly team. Chamber Customs, helping traders keep on trading. How goods are.
My apologies there. I got my hot finger across my mouse, and it seemed to trigger a movement to the next slide. Anyway, hopefully that informed you about what we do at Chamber Customs, both the fast track service, which puts you in control, and also the fully service option that we have for our businesses that we serve. But actually, I'm going to move straight on now. We can really help businesses, and there's some people in the Q&A I'm certain we can help. But, you know, there are some challenges facing traders, and Michael talked to that in terms of the impact this has had on trade flows, both to and from the European Union, and how that's compared to other countries over the last few months. So we know that actually there's been some big impacts on businesses in terms of Brexit, the pandemic, inflationary factors that we've seen impact on businesses around fuel, steel and shipping costs, and just price hikes that people are facing in terms of raw materials, And then there's the skill shortages. We've heard lots about the skill shortages in HGV drivers, but also we're hearing reports in our latest international trade study of difficulty in getting skilled workers, as well as unskilled workers, actually in many factories, in hospitality and in business operations up and down the country. So in our last survey, took place in October, 80% of firms have said they've seen an increase to their costs, and 66% have seen an increase in the time it takes to get goods either to market or from market. And so that all of those delays add to the cost of businesses. And we're talking to companies now who are saying, you know, can I really go to my customers and impose an 8, 9, 10% increase? Because actually my costs have been up by more than that. And so the challenge therefore, against the backdrop of low inflationary increases typically over the last 5, 6, 7 years, is that businesses, to survive and to be profitable and not to narrow the margin, as Arnie mentioned, actually have to put price rises in. So what does that do to your competitiveness over time with our customers? It makes us very nervous. That's what it does. But trading businesses now need to prepare for these new border controls. Both Michael and Arnie talked about the move to full customs clearance, and Michael saying actually this could have a further dampening effect on trade if the complexity and the burden on businesses is so great they decide actually I'm no longer going to be an importer of goods or an exporter of goods, and that would be really bad for our economy. So we have to absolutely avoid that. But we do need to make customs clearances, and part of our role at Chamber Customs is to make that process as easy for you as possible. And our fast track self-service module actually does that. It puts the declaration in the hands of the declarant, that's the businesses, and it provides full visibility on the work that we do in the background, right up to the point of the goods being cleared. So you can see what's happening in the process. And the skill part, the smart part, the expertise part, we've got a team of 160 people across the UK that can help you to make sure you do that bit right, because you should remember every customs declaration is like a tax return. That's how HMRC see it. It's a tax return. And if you get it right, all good. If you get it wrong, there could be penalties. And so we'll help you to make sure that your tax return, your customs clearance is done properly, that you declare any VAT that should be declared, right down to 0% VAT has to be declared, and any tariffs that you may be due to pay. And what we also do is we help businesses to recognize when actually goods can come into the UK under preference, and when goods can leave the UK and enter another market under preference, to promote the competitiveness of our export goods and to reduce the costs of importing. So that's what we do in our day and daily, and people like Arnie go out and advise firms on how to get their systems and processes in place. So businesses tell us this feels daunting and it is complicated work, but the good news is Chamber Customs can absolutely help. So let's get into the detail. Excuse me, I see I've got an extra E in EUR, 2 E's, extra E's in EUR1, but anyway, it is an EUR1 that's mentioned there. So first thing is there's the expiry of the easement on supplier declarations from the 1st of January. So companies now need to prove origin through a statement of origin. And that could be an EUR1 that you ask for your supplier to give you for goods moving into the UK, or it can be a supplier's declaration that also needs to be in place at the time of the export, not the time of the import, because goods can sit in places between times, or by importer's knowledge. Now, the complication here that you need to be aware of, and the reason why I cite an EUR1 as an option, HMRC incidentally don't really cite an EUR1 as an option. They say there's 2 options. There's an exporter's declaration, could be on invoice, and there's importer's knowledge. That's fine for HMRC, but actually in the real world, what we're hearing from businesses is that the importer's knowledge that HMRC will need you to have can be very hard to get from the supplier, because it will include, for example, the origin of each element of input, each component part, the cost of each component part, and whether the cost of all those component parts and labor inputs and any IP reach the threshold for being able to claim preferential origin. And so that can be the complication. It's fine if you're a big company where you sell from one division to another division. You're happy to share that, intimate knowledge of your production processes and supply chains. But if you're simply supplying goods to someone who is a customer and you don't want them to know the detail of your cost inputs and your profit margin, then it becomes impossible to have importers' knowledge. So I always think that asking your supplier to provide an EUR1 document, which can can cost very, very little money. I mean, you're talking about pennies, not hundreds of pounds. Typically in the UK, they're sold for about £25. And that's an EUR1 is a customs document. It's stamped by HMRC in the UK for goods going to another market. And they do tend to carry, particularly where they're issued from chambers of commerce as well, they carry some credibility with customs authorities around the world. And so they can be very helpful in either demanding from your suppliers in the European Union or in supplying them to your customers in the European Union in order that they don't later have a claim from their customs authority for duty that's been claimed, or duty-free goods that have come into the market, tariff-free, and they now demand that you pay those tariffs. And across our business, incidentally, in our advisory work, we are advising businesses right now on how to get that evidence together. And in some cases, it's impossible. They can't get the evidence because actually goods claimed under a preferential tariff during the last 12 months should never have been claimed in preferential terms because they came originally from China. They came from other markets where tariffs would be due. Secondly, there's the expiry of the easement on deferred supplementary customs declarations. This was where you could have goods arriving in the UK, they arrived at your premises, and you had 175 days in which to make a supplementary declaration for those goods. In effect, you were making your tax return on those goods up to 175 days later. As Michael said, that was extended from expiring in June to expiring on 31 December. It will not be extended. You will need to make full declarations after that point. But remember, any goods that you've not made declarations for up to the end of December, you have to make those declarations. And the way that you can make them is through something called Customs Freight Simplified Procedures, CFSP. We have an authorization for that. Other forwarders and the like will have authorizations for that. But you've missed the deadline for if you've got goods that have arrived between January and June, you've missed the deadline. We can still help you, and we can probably help you to try and mitigate penalties, but we can't make any guarantees. The important thing is get the declarations done. Mea culpa, tell HMRC what you've done and that you are delayed and that you're late, and plead with them that you now have systems and processes in place that you wanted to be compliant, you just didn't know that you had to do them. And we can, as I say, we can help with that. Big thing that happens on 1st of January, though, an overhaul of the harmonised system for commodity codes takes place because the EU is changing rather a lot. 351 sets of amendments to the UK commodity codes, impacting over 5,500 HS headings and subheadings. So this is a time when you need to be checking against the commodity codes that you're using and making sure that they are the new commodity codes and not the old commodity codes, because that could get people tripping up in the early part of next year. We'll have a fact sheet on that going on to our own website in the next week or so. Others will too. It's very available on the hmrc.gov.uk website. So you need to be checking your commodity codes because that's rather a lot of changes. And this is something that happens every few years. There is an update. This latest update coincides with some bigger changes for UK traders. There's also the introduction of the Goods Vehicle Movement System in GB. So that's applied for Northern Ireland over the last 12 months. And what this means is that your haulier will need to pre-notify the intention to move goods across the EU border typically and into the UK using GVMS. It means that they need to register the customs entry that is being imported into the UK on GVMS, as well as the truck registration number and so on. Hauliers have to deal with this, but if they aren't pre-notified in GVMS, they won't be able to leave Calais, for example, and arrive in Dover. they'll be turned back. And there's also pre-notification of plant products and animal products of animal origin before consignments leave the EU for GB, and they have to be pre-notified to the UK IPAFS database. Otherwise, they just won't be able to travel. Again, they'll be turned back. And some other changes coming in the future in July, September, and November all relate really to export health certificates, animals, products of animal origin, and plant-based materials, and whether they need to be moved towards a border control post and for inspection. So not all goods will be routed via using the GVMS system to a border control post, but it's possible that they will be for documentary and identity checks and so on from 1st of July. And some of those BCPs are under construction right now. And also safety and security certificates are required for a company and assignment consignments. It's something that it's unfortunate that we still have to do those, but we do. We are lobbying. William is very much lobbying for an agreement with the EU to rid us of the need for those. And also EHCs and animal origin products, imports and phytosanitary certificates and plant products from 1st of July. And then September, we bring in the same thing on dairy and dairy products. And then in November on fish products and composite products. So mainly for those people that are in the food production, food sector, that's where those changes are coming into place. Who are we, Chamber Customs? Well, we're experts in the complexities of international trade. It's what sets us apart from the rest. We do this thing, and we do it in I think Arnie talked about geeky way. We're probably a bit geeky about it, but it's technical, it's complex. You need to know what you're about here. And so we have a body of experts at the centre and 160 plus customs agents across the UK we train, continually do CPD with to keep them up to speed on what the latest border control issues are. We really do know our stuff. And those local teams are in chambers of commerce who you can trust. They've been trained to a very high standard, and they can call on experts like Arnie, myself, and our colleagues where they get the unusual, the one-off, the oddity kind of thing. And we help businesses large and small, all kinds of companies we help. We're very connected. And what I mean by that is to take the point that Arnie made about the technology. We're already working on CDS and Chief, so we're doing both in tandem, so we can make your customs entries on CDS if that facility is available in CDS right now. We're a bit of a first on that. We do first with the HMRC development team on CDS. We test and try new entries with them and with some of our customers. They're super keen to be on CDS right away. So we are trading on CDS. We will be new customers joining us from March forward. We'll only transact on CDS as our intention. But we have not only direct links to HMRC's Chief and CDS systems, but we also have direct links to every port in the UK that's going to have goods coming across it. We are connected to the inventory link systems. And so it means that we never subcontract, we never offshore your work. All your work is done in the UK by our staff, directly linked to the technology systems and inventory systems at the reports, whether it's air, sea, rail, road, it doesn't matter. We do the work directly for you. We also are making savings for our customers. And Michael talked to this issue of businesses not claiming preference when they could. We're a broker that's going to tell you that you could be claiming preference, and we're going to help you to understand what material you need to get to support your preference claim for goods arriving in the UK. Now that makes you more competitive and helps with those rising costs. And also we'll make sure that our systems actually are going to check the commodity code that you're submitting. And if it looks wrong, we're going to say to you, that looks wrong, are you sure? It's your declaration after all, but we're going to do a check and balance. We won't just take what you say and just throw it out there into the chief system. And also we're high in compliance. Our key thing is that we want our businesses to be compliant so that in the event of an HMRC audit, you will have all the material and all the information you need to be able to satisfy their inquiry of you. And incidentally, we get audited too. and we are always able, so far, touching wood and all things being in a fair wind, we're human, but we don't have any issues with HMRC and being able to provide them with the data they require. So we are specialists in this area. We only focus on the fiscal elements of your goods. We don't lift and shift goods. We don't run trucks. We just get the fiscal bit right. We're a bit like, who would you get to do your company accounts? Would you go to an accountant, or would you go to the shop down the road that sells alcohol? I mean, who do you go to? You go to the specialist to make sure you get it right. So that's all that we do. We just make sure we get it right. And if you don't believe us, in the presentation copy that you'll get sent out, you'll see some testimonials from our customers who talk about what we do, both in supporting brokerage and also in advisory work. There are these two options. Fast track customs clearance really puts the declaration in your hands. That's technology that we've developed and is available free of charge to you. It doesn't cost you anything to have that system and that software. And basically, you upload data from your own systems, or you connect through an API from an enterprise system. And actually, the machinery using artificial intelligence and machine learning speeds up and makes more efficient the processing of your customs declarations. And then one of our human beings reviews all of that for you, adds in the complicated stuff like Box 44 and licensing and the like, and submits your entries. And they are our priority entries in our business. That's all I'm going to say. I'm really excited to come to the Q&A, William. I always am, to hear what people are thinking and the challenges they're facing. But hopefully that's been useful for people, and we can move on to the Q&A. You're muted, William.
Thank you, Liam. Some fantastic practical advice there for companies in navigating the new customs and other controls. Well, we've had a huge array of questions coming through. Do keep them coming, incidentally, in the chat box. I wanted to start with one from Michael. So this is a question from Simon, asking, in your opinion, is the low preference utilization rate down to lack of promotion of procedures, or companies not wanting to complete the paperwork, both of those, or something else?
It's a hard question to answer, and actually I'd be interested to know what Arnie and Liam think of this, because you're the ones actually dealing with companies. The message I get from talking to people such as Arnie and Liam is that a large part of this is firms not being able to meet the rules of origin. And I've seen some questions on the chat which kind of allude to this as well. So these are companies that are buying in intermediate inputs from outside of the EU, from third countries, and there's just not enough UK originating material to justify getting rules of origin. That's obviously particularly an issue, I think, in textiles and clothing, but it's also true in other sectors. So my guess is that that is largely the reason.
Yeah, I mean, well, there is a question in there about bringing a T-shirt from Honduras into the UK, adding some design onto it, and can I claim origin? Well, actually, it's a really interesting example, because one of the things that it talks to is this idea of origin. Oftentimes businesses think that the origin can continue to be claimed and preferences continue to be claimed when goods move from country to country. They just don't. They can only be claimed, preferences can only be claimed once. And so if they've been claimed when the goods arrive in the UK, they can't further be claimed in moving the goods elsewhere unless something happens with those goods. So for example, let's take the T-shirts. If, for example, those T-shirts coming into the UK had a Banksy image that had an intellectual property value added to it, that transformed the T-shirt from being just a T-shirt to a Banksy original T-shirt, then potentially that could have, sufficiently changed its value and its process to imbue it with a new claim of UK origin. But if simply you print Adidas onto the T-shirt, nothing particularly original, the T-shirt is still a T-shirt. It hasn't changed its tariff heading. It hasn't transformed in some way to being different from being a T-shirt. It's still a T-shirt, and therefore you cannot subsequently claim preferential terms in moving those goods into the EU.
Now, I will just add one point to this. And while I agree that there are products that can't claim preferential origin due to the rules of origin not being met, if we go back a step, we got to remember that for many businesses, this is all new stuff. And there are so many small businesses that just don't have a customs manager or have a customs geek or guru or whatnot. And out of the sudden, you thought it was free lunch, but then you remember there is no such thing as free lunch, and free trade is nothing but, well, you know what I would say now. But the point is here, besides the actual product-specific rules of origin, there is a whole wealth of information to understand around rules of origin. Not only does my product qualify according to the annex rules, but also there are multiple rules in the beginning part of the EU-UK TCA and other agreements related to generic stuff like general transport rule and non-manipulation rule. And before you have read all of this, your head spins and you wish you've never started this whole thing in the first place. So let's also give our companies a bit of credit. We're trying really hard to make this work. But if you find that after reading and reading and reading, this is so complex, do you know what? If the duty rate's not high, I might not bother, because as you also pointed out, that it has to be worth it. It's optional, you don't have to claim it. So if it's 2% duty, maybe I would spend more time trying to navigate the rules and might get it wrong and have to deal with supplier declarations. Oh no, please. So this is why we got to give us credit. We got to give us time to learn, to read. And this is why it is so important that there is Chamber Customs that is, and a customs manager, of course, that is ready to support businesses, small, large, complex, or whatnot. If origin is an issue and you're not sure, let's talk it through, let's make it happen, and we'll get it done the right way.
Thank you, Arnie. Now move to a question from Anne, and this might be inspired, of course, by the changes that companies have experienced with the loss of access to markets database from the 1st of January. So Anne says, we export all around the world. Is there somewhere we can go to for advice on what customs documents each individual country requires, e.g. movement certificate, certificate of origin, how many commercial invoices, etc.? Someone want to take this one on, Liam?
I mean, I'm happy to come in here, and I think Arnie might have something to say as well. But and this will sound like I would say this, wouldn't I? But if you don't have that skill and knowledge and within your business, then you probably need to commission a specialist like Arnie to consult with you to understand the markets you are going to understand what trade agreements exist for your specific goods, because even under free trade agreements there are tariff rate quotas for some goods, so not all goods are tariff free, and actually, as Michael has shown, not all goods into the EU or from the EU have been tariff free. So if you don't have that knowledge, you can go through all this information is available on gov.uk. The difficulty businesses face is understanding how to navigate what's on gov.uk, and we had an early question in the chat about transiting goods through the GB to Northern Ireland, and Simon, I think Simon from Department for Transport, helpfully said, here's the link, and I think it's Anthony said, believe me, I've looked at that, it doesn't help me. And so sometimes you need someone to interpret that guidance into advice specific to your company, specific to the goods that you are trading and the markets into which you're going. And, Chamber Customs is a company that can do that for you. And we've got people with the Arnie's experience and skill who are going into businesses, doing the education, doing the training, designing the process and understanding, and then they're available to come back at any point that you need them to check and balance. But you need help to do that stuff. It's complex.
I will add one more point to this. So as Liam said, I can't stress this enough. Do you want to go into United Arab Emirates, Australia? Go to Gov UK. There is a wealth of knowledge. Everything's there. Every certificate you could need, every address you could need, everything's on gov.uk, right? And I applaud the government for doing all this, but where it's overkill, it doesn't help, right? Because it's not specific to what you need. There are lots of consideration that need to be thought of in the right order with the right timing. And so it's one, helping you to navigate this and saying, okay, we've looked at all this, which one of this is actually relevant? And in the end, if you are looking at markets abroad, you've got to talk to someone in that market. And how will you get to someone in Australia? How will you get to someone in Korea, in Japan? Well, again, the answer is at your fingertips, because look who's talking to you. It's the British Chamber of Commerce. And who's the British Chamber of Commerce connected to? The Global Chamber of Commerce. So with a network spanning around the world, we will find you a competent expert in Korea, in Australia, in Israel, and that ties the knot. You have the local expertise to talk in your language, in this case, English, but imagine we were Danish or whatnot. We will explain it in your language, and then we will consult with our network of experts around the world to make sure it happens for you too.
Great, thank you, Arnie. Maybe got time for just 2 further questions if we're really quick with the answers. And I should say all of the other questions that are in the chat, we will take away offline and answer and make sure that those who submitted them get the right response. But Nick is asking a question about VAT, very popular issue for exporters this year. So Nick asks, how can the UK exporter claim the VAT back that has been paid to the EU? They can't claim it through HMRC. I'm told they use regime 42 to zero rate the VAT. How can this work?
Arnie, do you want to come in on this?
Okay, I have the feeling that is for me. Okay, so when it's 42, be careful. That's it. Onward suppliers relief is something very, very specific that is not there in order for you to not pay the VAT. Remember the golden rule, VAT must be paid. There is, and unless there are very specific exemptions which usually do not apply, somebody has to pay the VAT. The VAT cannot be claimed back in the UK because it's not UK VAT. If you are importing into European Union, to Germany, for example, well, then this value added consumption tax has to be paid, has to be borne by the consumer of that service or good. And that happens in Germany. So this is not UK VAT, you can't claim it back. Now, in order to get it back, you'd need to be registered in Germany and then put it through the normal VAT registration system in Germany. Now, the onward relief 42 is a really, really specific issue where you import, say, over the channel into Calais, and then you would be paying French VAT, but it's German VAT that you ought to be paying because the consumption happens in Germany. So therefore, you're telling the French authorities, no, 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 merci beaucoup, I am not paying your French VAT. I am going to not pay the VAT because I'm going to move it to Germany where I will pay VAT. And then if you're registered in Germany, you can then offset it through the normal tax return. That is the way you can get rid of German VAT, through the German tax system. And that's what the objective of onward supply relief 42, procedure 42 is about. Do not be fooled and think that this is a way to avoid VAT. Somebody always pays.
Yeah, and usually the people that will end up paying are the customer that you sent the goods to under regime 42. And why is that the case? It's always the case that customs authorities go after the goods and the business that was the importer of record. And regardless of whether to go to some of the other questions in there about DDP terms, delivered duty paid, and German customers insisting on DDP, regardless of the terms that you consign the goods under, it is the customer in Germany who will be chased by the authorities in Germany. And so therefore, if you want to keep the customer, then you need to find a solution that allows you to continue to trade with that customer and deals with the VAT.
And we can tell you how.
Yeah.
We need more time and talk to you personally about your situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, you're muted, William.
We've had a lot of questions in the chat around VAT, so we will take those away and answer for those who submitted them.
Can I also say, William, that the quicker we will try to do that. There's a lot of questions and we're going to take time to come to those. If anyone has an inquiry, no quibble, make an inquiry on chambercustoms.co.uk and an inquiry page. And that means that we tend to respond through our ticketing procedure much faster. There's no obligation on you to buy our services. We'll do what we can to help you and point you in the right direction.
And I suppose just the final question to pose to you all, which comes from what we've discussed. In the next 12 months, looking ahead, what would each of you see as the aspect that gives you the most hope in terms of improvements in UK-EU trade, or gives you the most cause for concern that's going to unfold in 2022?
I think we should give it a moment.
The hope question is quite hard to answer because I'm not sure there is a lot of hope, frankly. I mean, I think on the hope side, one hopes that firms just learn to adjust and deal with it. But that's not straightforward, as I think Arnie and Liam have made very clear. On the sort of concern side, I think the biggest concern, and to some extent the elephant in the room in this discussion, has been the Northern Ireland Protocol going pear-shaped. Because if Article 16 is invoked, the EU will respond, will react, and that's going to undermine the TCA in its entirety, and not just with regard to NIGB trade. And that, to me, is the biggest concern.
Yeah, I can point exactly to that. The biggest concern is that the political wrangling overshadows pragmatism. I've always considered the UK very pragmatic, and then Brexit came about. And then I don't know what happened, but at the moment we are dealing with a lot of politics, especially around Northern Ireland, that have major repercussions to all of us. We need to stop that quite urgently, and we need to get down to the pragmatic solutions. And I don't want to take sides, but what the EU has said is entirely reasonable to me to solve some of the issues. I'm being very conservative here. That would already go a step further, and it takes the political, you did say that, out of it. We can't continue like this. We have enough on our plate to deal with the rules and around. So we must stop that. It's not good for business. It's not good for anybody's health, really. Hope, I do have hope. And the hope is that when we have realized finally that there is no going back, we are where we are and we need to get on with it, we then make the right decisions in our companies to ensure that we level up. See what I did there? Level up on customs knowledge, customs awareness, and customs procedures and processes. We set up systems, IT systems, and we get support that enable us to pass the EU border. And then once we have a system whereby this works well and we're happy, we then reconsider going abroad, further out. And if the product's right for the market, then we do not hesitate to go global. And with our customs knowledge and a product that is in demand across the world, we can grow globally faster. Step 1, Europe. Step 2, the world. That's my hope.
And finally, William, I mean, I don't level my hope at politicians. I think there's two kinds of people in the world. There's those that wait for something to happen and the people that make something happen. And I think if we can get businesses to a place where we stop looking and blaming Brexit for the circumstances or blaming COVID for the circumstances, but actually start to go and make things happen. My hope is that a year from now, businesses in the UK are much more literate about customs, trading under free trade agreements, gaining preferences and competitiveness, and dealing with our customs rules. We have a role where we could help with some of that, and we take that very seriously. But we also, the one thing I do want to do, the challenge is in getting people there, is actually getting businesses to see that whilst customs are complex and arrangements at the border can be complex, there are people who know how to do it and can help them. And we've got technology developments that can put that process in the hands of the trader, such that they can really do quite a lot for themselves, particularly around importing.
Thank you very much, Liam. Great note on which to finish. Can I thank our three amazing speakers, Michael, Liam and Arnie, for their contributions. Fantastic questions from those participating in this session as well. This will be available on demand. And I think the level of interest that we've had today signifies how much this is going to be an ongoing subject in next year as well. So thank you all very much indeed. Many thanks also to Chamber Customs and the BCC team for putting this together. I hope it's answered a great many of your questions, and we hope to see you next time around. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.